Hello, booktube. I'm Scott.
I'm now.
We're Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and we have an original tag today.
And we do.
So, the cancel culture tag.
Let's tag.
So, we tag Kieran, Emma, Sadie, Ange, Sean, Laura, Brian, Kevy, Rosie, Kat, Roz, Natabi, Jack, Jessica, Bob, Rachel, Courtney, Pay, Amrita, and Melissa. They are all excellent channels. Please check them out.
After you watch this tag. When you're tagging, though, it's a good idea to tag... try and tag someone who has a different opinion to you, because I think that this is one of those discussion tags that we like to do where having a whole bunch of people say different things will be super interesting.
Yeah.
Question number 2.
What is cancel or call out culture?
Well, I personally don't like the term cancel culture, because I basically think that it's used by people who would like to silence the voices that call out bigotry. So I don't really like the term, but I guess what it refers to is I don't necessarily think it's a new idea, but I definitely think that it's a more prevalent idea since like social media, that your public voice, you have some kind of responsibility when you use your public voice to not be a bastard.
Yeah.
And that if you do say something offensive, people have a right to point it out to you, and you have to, I mean, I guess you don't have to respond to it, but definitely, like, there will be people who judge you based on your response to that call out.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there is an assumption that you can sort of do what you want to do and not be called out for it, like in your personal life, but actually it's way more nuanced and blurry than that in actual fact.
Yeah.
But I think probably the best example of cancel or call out culture in our times has been the Me Too movement, because we have seen some people being called out and have their livelihoods taken away from them, although they're quite rich and powerful to begin with, and they're not in any...
I would argue that their livelihoods haven't been taken away from them, but, you know...
Yeah. But we've also seen people being called out and being able to continue creating... I mean, it's generally been about the movie industry, but it's not just. But we've been able to see actors continue to make movies after being called out by the Me Too movement. So I think it's really interesting because as a whole movement, it's had lots of little individual... It's had Harvey Weinstein, it's had Kevin Spacey, but it's also had Jeffrey Rush. And the way people have responded to those three people very differently sort of gives you a range of what can happen. And
yeah, but I also think like you're talking about the big famous end. I think call out culture is also saying to your mate, hey, that joke was racist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like literally in your personal life. And I think that there are those of us who sort of participate in that down to the micro interactions of our personal life, and also allow it to guide our purchasing decisions, the decisions that we make about who to read and what to watch and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I guess everyone makes their own decisions on what elements to be influenced by and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's actually a big, like, complex idea.
Yeah. And I know, like, we're going to talk about this in relation to books, but, for example, you could talk about it in relationship to the chocolate industry and how chocolate is farmed, or the coffee industry and how coffee is farmed.
Yeah, or even, like, I don't watch movies that contain an Affleck. Why? Rapists. You know, like...
Yeah. I don't watch movies that contain an Affleck because inequality.
Yeah, anyway.
Is cancel / call out culture a positive or negative force in booktube, bookstagram, or the bookish community as a whole? Why do you think this? And some examples on both sides. Okay. Well, I think cancel culture, it's like you could, like, it's kind of like religion. Religion is neither good nor bad. It is just religion. How people use it is good or bad. Yeah. And I think call out culture is the same. Like, you know, but I think in general, more things are right when they're being called, like more things are being correctly called out than incorrectly called out. And we should actually be calling out more things.
I think that cancel culture is a step in an evolution. I think at this point, what happens is someone is a douche. Someone calls them out on it. There's a little bit of a bandwagon pile-on situation. And it's 50-50 whether there's any long-term effects.
Yeah.
What doesn't seem to happen is a nuanced discussion of why the thing was wrong.
Yes.
And how we can systemically change what we do as a community so that that thing doesn't hurt people again. And I think that those conversations, once we start moving from focusing on the individual to focusing on the system, that's when cancel or call-out culture is going to have the best impact. So I think even the good impact that it has now is not quite as good as it can be. And I do think that there's like two sort of instances where I think the impact is really negative. And I think that both of those instances are when people either use the term cancel culture or they use the act of calling someone out to shut down conversation.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think it's I think that is the negative impact. Like, no matter what issue we're talking about, we have to be able to talk about it.
Number 4, from mixing fabrics to involuntary cannibalism, what transgressions would you boycott an author over?
Okay, so I have sort of two levels of, like, there are subjects I just don't enjoy reading about. Like, I'm not really into depictions of pedophilia, rape, or violence against women from the perspective of the perpetrator.
So the classic example of this is Lolita.
Yeah, I'm just not interested. Which is a big difference between that and I'm not going to read books by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie because she has publicly campaigned against trans people. And I don't read or support literature created by people who are promoting bigotry.
Yeah. And I think that there's a difference between somebody that is promoting TERF views and holds views.
Absolutely. I might know that someone is a TERF and read their stuff with a critical lens, but if they are actively campaigning that trans people should be...
And by campaigning, I mean saying in the public eye.
Yeah, absolutely. That trans people should be somehow I don't even know what they want. Because
they want trans women to be considered men and trans men to be considered women, don't they? Like,
yeah, which sounds like erasure, and I'm like, what do you want these people to do?
Yeah.
I don't feel like they even know what they want these people to do. They just want them to magically disappear.
They're inconvenient to their own views, and they don't want them there.
Exactly. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to murder them all? Like, I don't understand what these people actually want trans people to do. Just, it's so stupid. But that's...
But I don't think...
It's the active campaigning that makes me angry enough to boycott and just certain that I don't want to hear your point of view in fiction or otherwise.
Yeah. Obviously, if you have trans exclusive feminist views, I do not want to read you. If you have racist points of view, I don't want to read you. But I will say that both of these two things can come from a position of hate and can come from a position of misunderstanding. Now, if you're coming from a position of hate...
I'm not interested.
If you're coming from a position of misunderstanding, I still don't want to read you, right? But it's for a different reason. And that doesn't mean that I will boycott future books. It means that I don't want to read any of your past books.
or any books that relate to that topic. Because
Yeah.
that's the other thing. Like, sometimes you've got a J.K. Rowling who is campaigning against trans people to the point where all her books are about trans people as well. Like, you can't pretend that you can read J.K. Rowling's new fiction and love trans people. Like, you just can't, because it's disparaging to trans people, intentionally disparaging to trans people.
Yeah.
But not everyone writes about their bigoted viewpoint.
Yes.
And I think if they're not campaigning in society for their bigotry to be normalised, and if they're not writing about their bigotry, I'm less likely to boycott them.
Yes. I'm also older works where the author may have been racist. I mean, like, where the author is dead. If my point of reading them is not so much to pick it up as a piece of literature and to enjoy the literature, but to learn about the environment which the author was writing in, or something like that, or to learn about the opinions of the time, then I don't give a damn what your viewpoint is. I will learn about the opinions of the time and whether they disgust me.
Yeah.
I want to say violence against a spouse, against children, against general members of the public, against animals, those sort of things is not on. That I just can't tolerate the David Eddings and the David Foster Wallace and that sort of those sort of authors who have done yuck things. I'm not
super interested in reading the fantasy of a couple who systematically tortured children.
Yeah. Actually, David Eddings is the biggest what the fuck.
Yeah, completely.
Out there, to be honest.
Completely.
Question number 5. What does boycott mean to you? Not buy, not read, not promote, all three. How do you boycott, and does it depend on the transgression or offence?
It totally depends on the transgression or offence. I do all three of those levels. There are books that I read privately that I consider that I read critically, but that I would never talk about on this channel because I don't want to promote the author, but I'm still intellectually interested in some aspect of their writing. But most often, I don't want the author to have any money from me, and I won't promote them, which probably means I won't read them.
Yeah.
There are so many books to read. I don't need to find reasons to read problematic authors.
I'm happy to discuss any author on this channel, but I will discuss it within the context that I see fit.
Yeah.
And this is a video that I scrapped, but I was reading The Three-Body Problem by Shixin Li.
Yeah.
Who has been incredibly racist towards the Uyghur population, who are the Muslim a Muslim population in China.
Yeah.
Now, because of the way China works and all that, you can sort of question what he actually meant,
or what he actually believes versus what he
said.
Been asked to say, that sort of thing.
And I thought that I would read his book, which is considered to be quite what's it called when you criticize the government but you do it in a guarded way? Subversive. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. But it was just really bad, so I didn't. I DNF'd it. But anyway, the point is that this is a novel that I was happy to critically read with that in mind, and I was going to discuss this issue of what he said about the Uyghur populations in response to that, and point out, like, it's not a valid viewpoint. It's not a good thing to say.
Yeah.
That he could have been trapped into saying it as well.
Yes, totally. But we also do not use any of J.K. Terfling's books as answers to tag questions. We do not talk about J.K. Terfling's books in any other context other than to criticize the way she has behaved towards trans people. If we do, I certainly put a disclaimer before it or a caveat after it or something. Yeah, but it's I don't think we've, certainly not in a long time, mentioned any of those books. There are other examples where I will read, if you dig hard enough, almost you will always find something you disagree with an author. Yeah.
on, and disagreement is fine, but hateful views are not.
I think this is my thing. Like, it comes down to, you can even have hateful views. If I know about them, I actually prefer to know about them because then I can read you more critically. It for me is really about, are you using your platform as a writer to actively campaign? And I think that's why, for me, it's really only modern living authors that I end up boycotting, because it's about them trying to use their power and their voice against people who have no power and no voice.
And it is worthwhile to mention racism when you see it, and to try and frame that in a look at what is no longer acceptable, look at what was acceptable.
Yeah.
Remind yourself of what's going on and where people have had to come from and these sort of things. When does boycotting a book or author become cancel culture, and are the two even related?
I think the moment where we start talking about the fact that we boycott a author in a public space, then it starts being a conversation about what is and isn't acceptable, and that starts other people thinking about what is and isn't acceptable. And any, like, I don't think we have any influence where, we're not.
I mean, you say we don't have influence, but I know that we have mentioned, I know the last time we mentioned what David Eddings did, that people were like, well, I'm not reading David Eddings now.
I consider our influence to be that of the same as if you were sitting in the pub with your friends and talking to your friends. Because we're not a huge media outlet or anything like that. But that influence is still influence. And if one of our friends happens to be a larger channel, and then they carry on the conversation, and then that gets picked up on Twitter, and then, do you know what I mean? Like, piddles make puddles.
You never know when you're knocking over the first domino.
Exactly. So I do think that bringing discussion of boycotting into the public sphere is part of this call-out cancel culture. And I a little bit think it's our responsibility to do that. There is no point in boycotting things silently. I don't buy from Nestle. I haven't in 15 years. I really fucking like Milo, but I don't have it. You know why? Because human rights.
Yeah, I was actually, this was the example I could do. At the moment, before this video started, we were boycotting Nestle. Now, when you tell people what Nestle do, kill children in Africa, they generally, I mean, that is that makes it sound like Nestle is holding the gun, but that's very the simplified. Actions that Nestle's take ends up with children dying, and they know that. So
so they kill children.
So they kill children in Africa. But anyway, so when we say that, people are then people will hear that and go, well, I don't want to buy Nestle. We never mentioned it before on this channel because it's not really relevant.
No.
So have we just tried to cancel Nestle?
I mean, I hope so, because they deserve to be cancelled. We are, particularly when it comes to food, conscious of the human rights issues in the global food industry, because we sell food for a living.
But even before we sold food for a living.
I mean, that's probably part of the reason why we got into selling food for a living, is to provide an opportunity for people to buy food without having to worry about how many children died for their chocolate bar. Because chocolate, tea, coffee, spices, all the things. There are so many things that are produced by the slave labour of 5-year-olds whose lives are significantly shortened so that you can enjoy cheap food.
Yeah.
That's cancel culture. That's me calling it out. That's me saying this industry is broken and it is our responsibility as rich fuckers to not spend our money on this broken industry, because your enjoyment is not worth the death of a child.
Well, so this actually really then, my next thing is really going into question 8. So I'm going to say what I've said, and then I'm going to read the question, and then I'm going to let you respond. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Can we really cancel Nestle? We are 2 middle-class Australians playing against one of the 10 biggest companies in the world. How do you think power, money, size of audience, influence, etc. affects who is cancelling and being cancelled? E.g., can a small booktuber cancel a best-selling author? What about a large booktuber and a tiny author?
Okay, so here's the thing. This is why I don't like the term cancel culture. No one ever fucking gets cancelled. No one. Because anyone who is getting called out in the public sphere, 9 times out of 10, is someone with huge amounts of power. Harvey Weinstein still makes money off every movie and TV show he produced before he was called out. Every single one of them. Do you know how many Weinstein Company logos you see at the end of a movie's credits? Like, pay attention. It's a lot. And he is still getting royalties for every single one of those. You know, the idea that he has been cancelled because powerful women have called him out and he has been found to be a disgusting cretin. He hasn't been cancelled because he is immune, because he's rich enough. And ultimately, lots of the people that we call that need to be called out are untouchable because they are that level of rich.
So J.K. Turfling has not been cancelled.
She will never be cancelled. She has so much money. Her personal life and her personal vendetta against trans people cannot be stopped because she has too much money. If Twitter bans her, she has enough money to create JK Twitter.
So, that's really horrible.
It is, but it's true.
So what about the opposite scale of that? We recently reviewed an indie book. We recently reviewed Daryl by Jackie S. We gave it quite a favourable review. Now, there's absolutely nothing problematic about Jackie S. that I know of.
No, but I'm sure if J.K. Turfling read it,
But anyway, my point is, if we had given that a negative review because we didn't like the book, how is that different to us giving it, you know, I mean, it should not, but if we read an independent book and we don't like the book and we give it a bad review, versus we read an independent book, we do some research on the author, we find out they're a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and we say, how does that...
I mean, it's definitely going to have more impact. If you're talking a new author, an independently published author, a self-published author, they're much less protected from anything that we say as booktubers. And I think that we are all aware of that, even when we're not talking about whether they're problematic or not, even when we're reviewing. I think we're all a little bit conscious that our ripples are a bit more like waves in that scenario. Because some of these people have, you know, they've printed 5,000 books. We're not talking the 500 million books that Detransition Baby has sold. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You're not talking those numbers. It's... I think, like anything, when you're talking about identity politics and minorities and that sort of thing, you have to look at where you personally sit in the power structure, and are you punching up or are you punching down? And even if you're punching down and the person you're punching down on is a horrible bigot, I still feel like you've got to have a little bit of consideration for the fact that you're punching down.
Yeah, but I think you could probably be a bit more considerate of how you do it, but ultimately, I think that you have to call it out where you see it.
Oh shit, yeah, absolutely. I think bad behaviour is bad behaviour, and
you never know. I mean, how many booktubers have we seen start and then suddenly they're 10 times our size? You know, like, the influence of people is not static.
No. Yeah, and you don't know if this book is going to be the next media sensation, and all of a sudden someone who has very scary ideas is, I don't know, President of the United States.
That would never happen.
But I guess the other thing is, it's being used as a scare tactic to silence call-out culture. This term, cancel culture, is being used to conflate bullying with call-out culture.
I think there's an element of outrage that somebody's success will not be not be confined to the merit of their work, right? Which is actually, it's a very naive point of view, because nobody's success is nobody.
Anyone who understands privilege understands that
Meritocracy
is bullshit.
It's rubbish. And I think this is an outrage, and that is why you often see more privileged people speaking out against cancel culture, because they think that their hard work will somehow be undermined, even if they're not benefiting from it. And I just think it is a naivety, and it's the lack of an ability to put yourself in somebody's head and somebody's shoes to consider things from their point of view rather than your own point of view, is where that comes from.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, we're sort of yelling into the wind when we say Turfling's horrible, don't read her books, because
she's a horrible bitch. Yeah.
Well, but like, how effective is it, and how many of the people we follow and like on booktube read her books? You know?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you apply the same standards to the booktubers you watch? Have you ever called out, confronted, privately messaged, or unsubscribed from somebody over their opinions?
I think what you were literally just saying is probably my example of that. Anyone who, I mean, if you mention Harry Potter once in a blue moon, I'm not gonna judge you for it. But anyone who consistently promotes, and Harry Potter is a very good example of a fandom that is quite obsessive, and so I can understand how someone's content might be very Harry Potter heavy, but in the context of J.K. Rowling being a TERF, if you consistently promote Harry Potter or any J.K. Rowling content, and it makes up a significant portion of what you talk about, I will unsubscribe.
I think
just because I don't feel like our values align.
I think that if we take, I'm going to make up a fictional account here that I think people really struggle to understand this. If you have a group of friends and one of your friends says that they're raped by another one of your friends, and you've got, you know, say there's 10 friends here, right? Yeah. What is really happening is the 8 friends that were not involved in this rape have to choose sides. Yeah. And what they are going to not want to do is, because it's horrible, somebody has been raped, or somebody is lying about being raped, or whatever. Like, I'm trying not to, but by not picking sides,
you're choosing the side of the rapist.
Yeah, you are choosing the side of the rapist right there, right? When a crime is committed, by trying to stay neutral, you actually are picking the side of the more powerful person, which is usually the criminal, right? Not always, but usually. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use some form of reasoning and talking to people and make your own mind up, right? But by trying to stay neutral, you pick a side is really the thing.
Yes.
But this is, again, going off topic. For booktubers, I have unsubscribed to people over their opinions. We have been privately messaged by people over things we've said, and even just in the comments about things we've said. And usually, look, there's a difference between the things that we will say that will upset people, either upsetting people who are very conservative and think that our points of view are problematic, or they are examples of, like, when we misgender a non-binary person because we don't know that they're non-binary.
Yeah, in which case I want to be called out because I want to learn and correct myself.
And I got to tell you, there's a couple of fantastic booktubers who have called us out on those sort of things. Janet Remembered Reads, Josh at Josh's Bookish Voyage have called us out for using gendered like he or
incorrect
she.
pronouns.
Incorrect pronouns. That's always very nice and lovely about it. Always, you know, almost just by the way, you've used the wrong pronouns. You silly Billy. Or like that sort of tone. And I really appreciate that for those things. But here's that, like, when we say that TERFs are not nice people and that their opinions are not valid and they're hateful, that will always lose us subs.
Yeah.
And when we watch somebody who says the opposite of those opinions, then we're going to
unsubscribe. I think the thing is,
them.
in booktube, there is this weird little crossover between booktubers you'll watch are both media you consume and potential friends.
Yes.
And you're not going to hang out with people who, I mean, you might hang out with people who have the polar opposite values to yourself. But to be honest, if I wanted to do that, there's plenty of people who live in my neighborhood who are pigs. I come to booktube specifically because I'm looking for people who share my values, who I will be comfortable talking about the ideas presented in books, and know that I don't have to begin by justifying that women are equal and that trans women are women, and like I don't have to start with basic shit like that. I can get straight into the nitty-gritty of whatever the book is that we're discussing.
Yeah, and there's like, you can disagree with things, but there are things that are just so far apart and are so basic to your conversation.
Yes, and I guess also it's about frequency of the topic. Like, if you, I definitely think that even our closest booktube friends, we have values that we don't agree. But they might only come up once every 3 months, or they might be less dearly held views, or
yeah,
it's not a blanket rule. If you disagree with me, I'm going to unsubscribe.
I know. If cancel culture is a destructive force, a constructive force might be to highlight talented authors and excellent books from communities victimised by anybody you boycott. Please highlight some authors and recommend us some books. So I think the first community that I think we should talk about is the trans community.
Yeah, I definitely think we've talked about TERFs plenty in this video and many other videos.
I think if you are a regular here and you're watching this relatively soon after it was posted, you will have seen us talk about Daryl by Jackie S.
And rave about it. So that is definitely book number 1. And we've also talked a lot recently about Detransition Baby by Tori Peters, which is another fabulous trans book about trans people.
If you've been here a little bit longer, you will know that we are absolutely massive fans of Quakey Amazie.
Yes.
I would like, because we've not mentioned a trans man yet.
On my TBR, I have Amateur by Thomas Page McBee, who is it's a memoir by the first trans man professional boxer.
And if you only like fiction for whatever weird reason that might be, I think Carter Sickles' The Brightest Star is an excellent book about a gay man coming home to die of AIDS.
Yes.
It's a happy, rosy book by the sounds of it. No, I've read it. It's pretty sad. I think the next community to talk about are black people.
And people of colour.
Marlon James, wonderful black gay author. Bernardine Evaristo, absolutely brilliant. We've already said a Quakey Amazie, but again, another wonderful author.
Octavia Butler is the bomb diggity.
I absolutely adored A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mystery, one of the finest books I've ever read.
Celeste Ng, I think, is pretty high up there.
Yeah, I really like, if we're moving into more like East Asian cultures, I really like Sayaka Murata as an author.
Who wrote Earthling.
Earthling and Convenience Store Woman. I really enjoyed My Year of Meats by Ruth L. Ozeki.
Oh, my favourite book last year was Kim Jeong, born 1982, and I've forgotten the author's name entirely. But roll with that. Nevo is another one, and Han Kang.
Oh, I like Han Kang.
Yeah.
If you would like an Australian Aboriginal author, not one that I personally enjoy, but so many people are loving, The Yield by Tara June Winch. And I think I am the only person to disagree with that. And I think that you should listen to other people, because if you watch the video where I say why I don't like it,
it's
a very Scott reason, and it's nothing to do with the content of the book. It's to do with the writing style in my brain, essentially. But so many people I trust like that book, and I think that.
I think there's loads of authors of colour. We could go on forever with this, but we should probably talk about some queer books.
Yeah, definitely talk about some queer books. I mean, again, I've already mentioned Marlon James. I really enjoyed earlier this year Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. That was excellent, and that was again, it's an intersection of person of colour and
Yep.
just a real old classic by a gay man. Oscar Wilde, Portrait of Dorian Gray is a wonderful,
It's a corker.
wonderful. James Baldwin, wonderful writer, gay man, brilliant black man as well. Sarah Waters, her stuff is so much fun.
I'm gonna say Douglas Stewart of Sugar Bane fame, but also
Yes, good call.
someone who I know Scott won't mention because he's not a fan, but Shauna Maguire is awesome.
You make it sound like I don't like her work, but I've never actually
It's
read
just not your thing.
their work.
Also, Unicorn, the Memoir of a Muslim Drag Queen by Amru Al-Qadi. We both read early this year. That was a wicked queer book.
I read it in December and wondered, I think it was 5th or 6th on my all-time, on my 2020 list. I think that's long enough because we're
that's
about
some
to hit an hour. Love to hear everybody's opinions on
all of
on
these
this.
questions.
We clearly had a lot to say, and
It's a big, rambly topic with lots of meat in it. So I hope that everyone enjoys this tag, and I hope that we can discuss cancel culture without too many cancellations.
Yeah, I want to say, like, the point of this was to try and have a conversation where people with different viewpoints could express their with. And I don't mean different viewpoints like I don't like black people. That is not a valid viewpoint. But I think cancel culture is damaging because of X. I think cancel culture is fine because of why I want those. That can be a very respectful and interesting conversation which we can all learn from.
Yes, very happy to continue the conversation about cancel culture in the comments, but we will not be debating anyone's right to be a human.
Yeah.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.